2 Samuel 23. Now these are the last words of David. The oracle of David, the son of Jesse, the oracle of the man who was raised on high, the anointed of God of Jacob, the sweet psalmist of Israel. The Spirit of the Lord speaks by me, his word is on my tongue. The God of Israel has spoken, the rock of Israel has said to me, when one rules justly over men, ruling in the fear of God, he dawns on them like the morning light, like the sun shining forth on a cloudless morning, like rain that makes grass to sprout from the earth. For does not my house stand so with God? For he has made me an everlasting covenant, ordered in all things and secure. For will he not cause to prosper all my help and my desire? But worthless men are like the thorns that are thrown away, where they cannot be taken with the hand. But the man who touches them arms himself with iron and the shaft of spear, and they are utterly consumed with fire. All right. Okay. So this may be just more of a continuation of the singing that. Shoot, got my thing all mixed up here.
Jake. Starting.
I'm not starting over. I never start over. Okay, so it says, now these are the last words of David. Probably doesn't really mean like his last physical words. More like these are the things that he's writing about himself. You know, that kind of stuff for it. Okay.
Maybe the last document or
Right.
song or
Yeah.
song.
Right. That's,
Right.
Mine even has a little title that says David's last song.
Song, right.
Yeah. Hey, Jay.
Hey, Jay. Morning. It's all right. So it starts, the oracle of David, the son of Jesse. It stopped right there because it struck me of all the things for him to write.
2 Samuel 23.
For him to write about himself. He doesn't say, you know, the oracle of David, God's great king.
Right.
Yeah, the great mighty victor of all these battles and war. Here's, you know, me who has done grand, but rather just the son of Jesse. Who's Jesse?
His dad.
And who is he? Right? What marks Jesse, besides being dad,
Right.
of significance? Honestly, there's nothing.
Right.
I mean, I'm not trying to knock on poor Jesse here. I'm just saying he's not any person that has like won victories and, you know, battles and has done mighty great works for God, you know, that kind of stuff. He's a rancher, right? He's a sheep herder kind of
Right.
guy.
Right.
So it's remarkable to me that that David speaks of himself as, I'm just the son of Jesse. I'm the son of really nobody. He kind of just says, I too am of that person. I'm not of any noble heritage. I'm just the son.
But in those days, they didn't have really last names.
No, they didn't. No.
That's how they identified.
Right.
I mean, even
Right.
Leonardo da Vinci, he's Leonardo from the town of Da Vinci, or
Right.
how that's worded.
Of Da Vinci, right.
Of Vinci, yeah. So,
Yeah.
you know, to him, I think that's as much as his name as it is.
It
I
is.
don't think he's boasting.
Yeah, I
But
really,
you're right. He is saying, hey, I'm
just this
just this
guy.
guy.
Just this guy,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
I'm going to tell you what I see in this though is this is a psalm. It's David's last song, and I think that first line, if you listen to a song, every song's got a hook line or it's got a chorus. I think that's David's chorus because when you go on and read, he's setting us up, right? Because he's saying, now these are the last words of David. David the son of Jesse. David the son of Jesse declares. In other words, I'm nobody, right? But he goes on to say, and the man who was raised on high.
On high, right.
So in other words, I'm nobody. I came from nothing, and yet this is what God did
Yeah.
in my life. And
Right.
that's where, and then he goes on to,
Right.
you know,
To speak this
to
through.
speak,
So-
right,
right.
exactly.
And so he gets to the next phrase there. Mine says, the anointed of God of Jacob. Remember the story. It's kind of, if you go back, where he was selecting David. Remember how David was selected?
Yeah.
You know, where are all your sons? You know, that kind of thing. And
Yeah.
well, here's, I don't know, was it 7 of them, or I don't know what the number was. Yeah, oh, those are nice and big, tall guys. Yeah, okay, great. No, you know. Well, so you don't have any more sons? Well, I got the kid out in the
He's
back.
back, yeah,
The
he's
runt,
watching it.
yeah, of the family.
The runt, that's it.
Right.
He's taking care of the sheep that's there. You know, farmers or ranchers do seem to have this humility behind them, this simpleness maybe.
Mhm.
There's not a lot of airs that they put on, because when it comes right down to it, you know, animals are going to be animals, and you live in that midst of all of these. And I think that's kind of like we're saying, this is David's humility coming out. We see that story after story of all the things. He doesn't boast upon himself. I just find that fascinating that he does that. That here's this person that was actually anointed by God. He's not standing around beating his chest saying, I'm all that, I'm all that. You know? And then he describes himself as the sweet psalmist of Israel. Didn't we just read about wars that David had fought? I mean, David has killed people. He's beheaded them. He's murdered. He's, you know, done a lot of bad things, right? That we have read. We've had the privilege of seeing David's life a little bit more, probably closer than we like to see people's lives, and that exposes their flaws. But yet David says the sweet psalmist of Israel.
Yeah.
How do you reconcile that?
It was the part of his epitaph that counted, that was imparted to him.
Yeah, I think it's exactly right. I think he did the things, and I think we may have read that last time, that David did the things that he had to do, right? The things that made him a man of war, or the things that he had to do. That's not what his nature was about, right? He did those things because that, in effect, he did them because God was leading him to do it. He was doing it because he was following what God wanted him to do. But in reality, this is who he was. I mean, think about him tending the sheep, watching sheep, playing a harp, you know, and then, but yet at the same time that he had that tenderness about him and that humility that you're talking about of being a rancher or a farmer or whatever, he still, when he had to, fought off the bears and the wolves.
Right.
And I think that's how he ruled Israel.
Right.
He was this sweet psalmist, this one that spoke the truth, and yet when he had to be the strength and the one to step up and do what God called him to do, then he would do it. But, you know, what we see in here, that's never how he saw himself,
Right.
you know.
It's interesting that I guess in our culture we think of humility really as weakness,
Right, absolutely.
which
Yeah.
I really just call it, you know, strength under control, right? That's to me is what that is. Okay, we spent all that time and we got through verse 1. The Spirit of the Lord speaks by me; His word is on my tongue. Any comments?
Mine has it in past tense.
The word spoke.
Spoke to me, and his word was.
Interesting. The tense changed there.
Mhm.
It's interesting.
Well, this is, it spoke by me, is what this is the New American.
Yeah.
And, you know, so he talks about, I don't know if that makes a difference or not. I don't know if he's kind of, I don't know if laminating is the right word, but going over his history as opposed to speaks to me
Right.
now, or like I am his spokesman, or
Right.
it's,
Yeah, this is kind of interesting too, because I don't remember reading much in Second Samuel, where David actually is the great orator.
Right.
I mean, most of the things that we hear that are spoken come from the prophet. It's,
That's
you know,
true,
from the
yeah,
prophet
yeah.
about David or to the people, but
Yeah, I think probably more so than trying to say that he was a great orator, he's saying he's spirit led on what he said. You know, or he was, the Spirit of the Lord
yeah, I think
was
you could be
carrying
right
along
there.
his thoughts and
Right.
speech.
And it could be that he's going back to the idea of being the sweet psalmist of Israel also.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah.
You know, that it was God that directed him even in that
Right.
capacity.
And I find it interesting that the phrase "His word is on my tongue" is more speaks of like an authority.
Yeah,
This is the authority that I'm speaking from
Mhm.
here. Not because I'm king, I speak these words, right? Not because you placed me in this position, therefore I have authority.
right.
But the authority of God,
The Spirit of
God,
the
the
Lord.
Spirit of God here, the Spirit of the Lord here.
Mhm.
The God of Israel has spoken. The Rock of Israel has said to me, when one rules justly over men, ruling in the fear of God, he dawns on them like the morning light, like the sun shining forth on a cloudless morning, like rain that makes grass to sprout from the earth. So, kind of a transitional thing here. In verse 2, it seems that that is setting the baseline of why I am in right standing, why I'm in the position to speak the words I'm about to speak. This is the authority that I have. Verse 3 goes into this interesting, what is the word? It's not an analogy, it's almost an illustration here.
Mhm.
When one rules justly over men, ruling in the fear of God, what happens?
It's like the early morning sunrise.
Yeah.
And what's great about that? It's morning.
Yeah.
For the morning guy, what's great about that?
Well, the tender grass springing from the earth, be clear shining after the rain. It's,
Mhm.
getting back to your farmer or rancher mentality. It's,
Right,
we live and die by nature.
yeah. Right,
The sun, the rains, and all this. And
right.
a clear sunny morning implies there's no storms on the horizon. There's no, hurricane,
Right.
tornado.
The day is starting with peace. It's calm.
Right. Calm and peace, and it's
Right.
new opportunities, etc.
And that's what happens when you're ruling justly over men.
That's right. There's
Right.
no storm on the horizon.
There's no storm on the horizon. And it's interesting when I think about that and I tie that into his son Absalom. Because he didn't rule justly. Remember, he was confronted with Absalom's sin and
Mhm.
he didn't
Didn't
rule
do
on it.
anything,
He just
right.
kind of like skirted it. So some of this to me is his acknowledgement that when we don't rule justly, we see the storms, we see the turmoil that's caused here. By the way, I don't think he's talking about God's rule here. I don't think you can equate that because the he in the language talks about he being. That he is a human,
Lowercase h.
right, not the God Almighty here. Yeah, because mine often is referring. Verse 4, he dawns on them, is referring to the one who rules in verse 3. So it's kind of a tie
Mhm.
into that.
Well, I think I know in my case, you make decisions and you rule, but you have a certain amount of authority. But then when your boss is out and he delegates you signature authority or anything else, hey, well, I'm out for this week. You're in charge. That means a lot. And so when you sign something, you have to make sure you tell them, I'm signing on behalf of Joe,
Yeah.
not under my authority.
Right.
And so you put the PP and you write your name and then you sign it. And there's other ways, so when you make a decision, it's like, hey guys, this is I'm speaking on behalf of the corner office.
Right.
I think that's sort of what he's doing here. He's saying that the Holy Spirit's on me, blah, 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 but I'm not great like him, but I've been delegated, I'm holding the power of the pen, I'm holding the,
Right.
not the magic wand, I don't want to
Right.
go there, but I'm holding the orb or whatever
Right.
for this week. And it's a temporary thing, but for right now, I've been given this authority, and so therefore, X.
Mhm.
So I think, in a way, he's sort of putting the PP in the bottom of the letter,
Yeah.
that on the authority delegated to me, so and so.
Yeah. Interesting phrase, we just want to cover it real quickly. Verse 3, at the end of verse 3, ruling in the fear of God. Is that saying ruling in the fear of getting smacked by God if I do something wrong? Is that kind of fear of God?
Well, sure, yes, to a certain degree.
Okay.
Yeah.
But getting back to my example, it's, when I make a decision, it's not like I'm a kid in the candy shop. I still have to answer to my boss
Right.
when he gets back
Right.
that, hey, by the way, I made this decision.
Right.
And hopefully he says, well, whether I like it or not, he'll abide by it.
Yeah.
But it may not have been his decision, but it won't be, that's wrong, one, you're fired, two, let's fix what he just did, you know, and that's,
Right.
so it's a fear, but it's a healthy fear. It's not a,
It's respect.
It's a recognition of
Yeah.
who he is and that you're under his,
Right.
ultimately under his authority.
Yeah.
respect. I like that.
Yeah, and oftentimes our American languages of fear gets butchered up over time, and we think of it as a mean dad, busting into the room to punish you,
Right.
kind of fear, and it's not that. This is a full respect, full on respect, is what fear used to mean here. Others? Verse 5, for does not my house stand so with God? Is that one of those rhetorical questions?
I think he's saying, that those things that we just said are the way his condition is, or was. His condition was, the past tense. He's looking back.
Yeah. I mean, the way to say that is, my house does stand with God, I guess is here. And then the next phrase, for he has made with me an everlasting covenant. I think that relates to, what's that, chapter 7, way back in 7, it talks about how God made a covenant with David.
His lineage.
Right. And then ordered in all things and secure. As a computer programmer, I just love that phrase. It's just so nice. Ordered in all things and secure. I just, it ought to be one of my passwords or something.
Engineers can relate to that too.
You know what I'm saying? It's just nice. There's no chaos there. And
I like that.
yeah, it's a great phrase there. For he will not cause to prosper will he not, cause to prosper all my help and my desire. I think there's a caution here about using this as prosperity.
Well, I was just gonna say, if John was here, he'd
Yeah,
go
he'd be
off,
bringing that
he'd go
up.
off on a rant for
Yeah.
about the next 5
You can represent John today.
John, we love you, man, if you're watching this YouTube. Here,
You count on you.
right, exactly. And so let's help others with this. To prosper all my help and my desire. What was what was David's desire? Right? It was to be a man after God's own heart. That was his desire.
Serve God, yeah.
Right. And I think that's just emphasizing
Yeah,
that there.
right. And the times he got in trouble was when his desires got to be what he wanted.
Yeah, yeah,
You know, there's the times when we see David falling and, you know, having to answer for his consequences, having to answer and have the consequences on him from his decisions.
right, right.
Have you ever thought about writing your own eulogy or epitaph? And, you know, what would you draw attention to? You
Right.
know, for, say, a 3-minute speech, what would you, so, you know, kind of like David here, there's a lot of things that he's not saying. There's a lot of things, you know, where he was in despair, or he did
Sure.
the wrong thing, or he failed with his children. But ultimately, when the rubber met the road over his lifetime, you know, what
Yeah.
were the things that mattered? And so, what would you put, you know, in a 3-minute summary of your life? Is like, you know, you wouldn't try to go back and harp on, well, gee, you know, I didn't really fulfill this role as good as I could have, but I walked with the Lord,
Right.
and I, you know, the Spirit of the Lord carried me through.
Right.
That may be the punchline. He's writing a song here,
Yeah.
Yeah,
and it's sort of like writing his own eulogy, looking back over his life.
interesting. Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, mine would have been, oops, that was a mistake.
Yeah.
I already know that's what mine would be.
Called the doodle.
Exactly. Caught a do loop and I ain't getting out.
Well,
Yeah.
you say that, it's funny, because I saw that the other day, and it stuck with me. Very few things stick with me, because my memory's so shoddy, but it was, and I'm sure it was said kind of tongue in cheek and in jest, but it was, write your own eulogy before, you know, or so you can make sure you get what you want in there, or something like that. But then on the other hand is, how do you want people to remember you? I've heard that phrase a lot.
Right.
You know, how do the other people, your family or whatever, see you? Gone all the time, working all the time. Yeah, you provided for the family, but we never saw them. Or,
Right.
But you could write, I'm getting way off subject, but you can write, you know, yourself. We tend to be, or a lot of us tend to be more critical than, you know,
What your family would be.
than other people would be.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of our, you know, we like to fix stuff, so you look for what's wrong, not necessarily what's right. And other people see what's right,
Mm-hmm.
or at least certain things that they see. So that's always a tough one.
Yeah.
And I've had people that write glowing reports, but it's like, yeah, but what all this stuff over here you're missing?
Yeah.
Or vice versa, you know, so do you have Chicken Little, or do you have, you know, so that's always a tough one.
Yeah, to have that honest critique.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's really all the above.
Right.
It's not
Yeah.
one or the other.
That's true. It's all of it.
Yeah, we have good redeeming qualities, but we also have things that we're imperfect.
It's everybody.
Yeah. But I think,
So it is kind of a challenge to be honest about yourself, and I guess doing that exercise of writing your eulogy would kind of expose, you know, how honest are you with, you know, yourself. And I guess it would really kind of be a good measure of how you're standing with God.
Yeah, it would.
You know?
When it all, because, you know, if you're right on the verge of, you know, translating, looking back, what really mattered? What point do you want to leave?
Right. Right. Yeah.
I think it also shows that there's always more you can do. I mean, that's why I'd be a terrible artist. And I mean, you know, these artists just would move it out and, well, that's great. And I'm over there going, yeah, but I could change this. And
Yeah,
change that.
exactly. Yeah.
You know, this little corner I can round up. Next thing I know, I got garbage. You know?
Right. Right.
But there's always something you can improve. And I think by writing that type of stuff, you can say, well, I want to be known as a person who walks with God. Okay, well, all right, you remember last night, and you remember what you did, what you thought 2 weeks ago. And that's just where I have struggles with that. Not that I'm a depressive, negative guy, but it's just the nature is, you can always pick holes in stuff you write, or anybody writes.
And think about it, until the whole situation with Absalom, right? David was a man that, when he made a mistake, he asked forgiveness and he moved on.
Yeah, that's true.
But when it came to Absalom, he never did. He never moved on from what Scripture records for us.
Right.
the whole situation with Absalom's rebellion affected him for the rest of his life.
Yep.
You know, so I think in looking back looking at this, you know, he doesn't see himself post Absalom. He's writing about himself here before the whole rebellion with Absalom, basically saying, you know, not that I did everything right, but yet I asked forgiveness for it, and then I moved on in my life.
Yeah.
You know, I moved on to do the things that God asked me to, you know, asked me to do.
Yeah.
Then he contrasts that in verse 6 with but worthless men. Isn't there another word for worthless men? You guys have that same phrase in 6?
Sons of rebellion.
Sons of rebellion, right? The sons of rebellion are all like thorns that are thrown away. You know, what good is a thorn anyways? For they cannot be taken with the hand, and then it describes how the man has to use like iron and a shaft spear so they can throw it in the fire. You know, and utterly consumed with fire. I saw an alternate phrasing on that said burned right there on the spot.
And mine says burned with fire in their place.
Yeah, right there, right on that spot there. So,
That's an interesting way to put that.
yeah.
Cannot be taken in hand.
Yeah. And that kind of touches his feelings on Absalom right there.
In what way?
Well, I mean, he recognizes there's a volatility, that's the right word, of people that are rebelling. I mean, you need some protection. It's not something you can handle by yourself. You got to have. Well, he didn't talk about the Holy Spirit specifically, but you need help. You can't just, as a proverbial naked man by yourself, go in and take care of certain things. There's some things that you can't fix without the spear and the iron, which I assume is like armor of some sort, or a shield or something to protect you.
I think it's John 15 that talks about cutting branches. You know, I'm the vine, you're the branches, and those that don't bear fruit are cut off, thrown away, or burned up.
Right.
So there's a little bit of a parallel to these being thorns being cut off, thrown away.
The interesting thing here is it's almost like he's saying that the only way to deal with worthless people, there's no reasoning with them. You know, there's no giving them a talk or trying to. The only way you get the point across to them is to come at them with, you know, with force. You know, and of course, I mean, we're talking about a whole different, you know,
Right.
whatever way you want to put it. This is the law and under the law and everything else.
Right.
But you know, he's saying here that because they cannot be taken in hand, you know, those people cannot be dealt with reasoning, with whatever. You've got to come to them with armed with iron and spear, and they'll be completely burned right there in their place.
Right.
You know, so and that's how that's how David dealt with.
Well, not just Absalom, but Saul and other.
Yeah.
You know, so this is the flip side to the part above. The
Yeah.
part above was him reflecting on where he was used by the Lord,
Right.
and led by the Spirit, and did
Right.
And then the flip side was he had to deal with a lot of dirty stuff.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's right. I think that's the side. I think you're right, Steve. I think that's the side that he's saying, you know, this is who he was, and this is. But there are times when God has called him to deal with worthless people, and the way that he dealt with them is in this way. You know, that he had to deal with them with the shield and the sword. You know.
And it started with Saul.
Yes. Right. Exactly. Yep.
Yeah. Compare and contrast. That's his common technique
Yeah,
all
that's
the
it.
time.
Yeah.
Compare and contrast.
That's right.
Yeah, because he was comparing when one rules justly over men, And then in the other is the opposite of that. Okay, but worthless men.
That's it.
Those are the ones that aren't ruling justly
Right.
on it. So
I mean,
Right.
he doesn't really describe what a worthless man is, or a son of rebellion.
well, to me, that's why I'm saying it's the opposite. The son of rebellion is those who do not rule justly.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Fair.
That
Yeah, that's-
rebel against that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it's the opposite of the above.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is to love mercy and justice. That's the as one of the prophets talk about.
Yeah. Boy, we're deep bunch.
We are. For shallow minds like us, yeah, we're deep. We're deep.
One thing that we may, and this may or not, it kind of puts a different twist on it. That verse 1, if you notice, is not in parentheses.
In parentheses?
Yes.
Quotes.
Quotes.
Oh,
Quotes.
yeah, I'm sorry, in quotes. It's not in quotes, right? So the author is the one who wrote verse 1,
That's right.
not David.
Yeah.
And that's what I was just kind of turning back, and it says the author is probably
One of
Abiathar,
the, okay.
the priest, or one of the priests that was under the training of Samuel, because Samuel recorded some of
Right.
1 Samuel until he died. So this may be one of the priests that's recording this. So that whole verse 1 is basically someone else setting up what David's going to do here. This is someone else's view of who David is.
Right.
So it kind of gives a little bit of a different view on that. And then of course then it's the quotes with that start where David's
Yeah.
words actually
Yeah.
start.
All the way to
so-
the end of 7 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just noticed that one.
That's a good point.
You would get a bonus point on
I get a
your,
bonus point for
Yeah.
success.
Well, that kind of gets back to what we were talking about the obituary.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
The first one is what other people have said of David.
Right. Yeah.
He's, well, son of Jesse, or that's just a definer. Man raised up on high,
Yeah.
anointed by God, and a sweet psalmist. So
Yeah,
that is how
that's how.
he, at least, if not others,
Yeah, it's a great point.
saw David.
And then it goes on to see how David saw himself.
Right.
Right.
This is what
This is
David
how
said,
David. This is
yeah.
how David ruled. This is how I saw my role in this earth for God. So,
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a good
Yeah.
point.
It is.
But that's kind of scary when you get to between 5 and 6, is that if you rule justly then you will get just ruling, if you will, by David. But if you're one of those guys,
Right.
you're
Right.
toast. And it's like, how far do you push?
Right.
When do you become the bad guy?
And even in the best of situations and times, there was always at least some bad and ugly.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
It wasn't always just 100%.
Right. And I think it goes back to it depends upon what is truly your desire. What is the reason? What is the focus behind how you do it? I mean, we all fall, we all slip, but what is my motivation? Is my motivation to draw attention to me, or is my motivation to make God look good?
Yeah.
Which is what we're all called to
That's
do.
what we're here for.
We're here to make God look good. I mean, that's basically what we're here for.
Yeah.
But there are times when in the midst of making God look good, we slip in a little bit making Mickey look good.
Right.
Yeah.
And like I said, those are the times that when David got in trouble is when, he slipped into those modes. So,
Yep, yep.
Okay. All right, we're going to stop here.